Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Today, we are going to give away, hopefully, a copy of Ghosts of Dragonspear Castle. This is a cool book. It came out um, in 2013 at Gen Con, and it included the rules as they were for D&D Next, which became 5th edition a year later in 2014. And it's got also pre-generated characters and several cool adventures in it. And if we get 10 or more super chats, I'll mail that off to one of the super chatters. So don't necessarily super chat unless you want to just support the show because we might not get to 10, but wish us luck. All right. So the big news is the main three of 5th edition have left the company or are leaving the company very soon. We have this article here by Christian Hoffer at Screen Rant, where it says Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins to leave Dungeons and Dragons design team. And of course, Mike Mearls left the design team quite some time ago and Wizards of the Coast in total recently. So those three, I have signatures, my 5th edition player's handbook from, I think, Jeremy and Mike. I don't think I ever got Chris Perkins' signature. Do you remember when they were at Gen Con right after the launch, David?
Yeah.
They used to come quite often. I have a cool story about Chris Perkins, and I can't recall if this was after 5th edition launched or if it was still 4th edition, but the employees for Wizards would come to Gen Con and they would participate in games, in adventures. So we were like, sat down to play. I don't know if you were in the one I played in, David. I can't recall.
I don't think so.
So I sit down to play at a table, and Chris Perkins sits down next to us to play. And he's got, let's see, his character was a elven priest, a high elven priest, but who worshipped Loth. And he played her as creepily as you can imagine, a high elven priest worshiping Loth. And it was great. He was a great player. And really a fantastic DM, of course. You've seen plenty of his DMing. So he seemed like a really nice guy. He was really great to have at the table. And man, has he put out some amazing adventures through the years as the lead, designer on adventures.
Absolutely.
Started what, 23 years ago, 28 years ago, 20 plus years ago.
Well, he said he was has been an employee for 29 years, I think he said.
Yeah.
Which is definitely the longevity champion, because I don't think there's anyone there that's even close. And he brought a real vision of the history of the game and all sorts of, I think he had a little affection for some of the crazier elements of the game because they seem to keep popping up on his adventures.
Yeah.
But definitely that sort of history, he had a love for it. And I think he tended to drive the team to revisit some of those familiar places and tropes that come from the ancient days of D&D. So, that creative spark definitely is going to be missed.
Yeah. I did a post recently where I was canvassing everyone for, what were the top 5th edition adventures? And over again, we got Curse of Strahd and Tomb of Annihilation. And what do those two have in common? It's like they are one big adventure location that's vast and you can explore it. And there's machinations going on with the enemies that you may or may not know. And then there's lots of stuff all around the adventure site that you can explore. And those were top of the list. Ones that didn't show up very often were like the Spelljammer adventure, the Planescape adventure. And I feel like those are becoming like tourist adventures where you go to a location and you go to another location, you never have time to explore anything. You're just like, hey, look how cool this is. Hey, look how cool this is. What are your thoughts on those?
Total agreement on that, because those two were very linear, very make a stop and then do a thing and then go to the next stop. And really what you did at each stop didn't so much matter. Other than, I assume you're going to survive.
Yeah.
But those adventures you cited, Tomb of Annihilation and Curse of Strahd, they do a great job of giving the characters and the players behind the characters a feeling
Oops.
That
Looks like we
they've got a
lost David.
lot of freedom and autonomy to do things.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. You're back. You're
am I
back.
back? Yeah,
Yeah.
they gave them a lot of freedom and autonomy to do things without striking a feeling of decision paralysis, where it's just, well, I don't know what you want to do, just anyway. Plus, what they had that, say, Dungeon of the Mad Mage lacked is they had an overriding story. And when I was running all 3 of those adventures in the game store, the contrast between Dungeon of the Mad Mage, where the players kind of lost interest because nothing was driving them other than let's go down and get some treasure, versus the ones with villains that sort of had an end game, and that really helped propel the adventure in a way.
Yeah. Now, a lot of credit, of course, to Tracy Hickman, Laura Hickman for Curse of Strahd. Just a fantastic location to explore, villain with purpose, a lot of fun. And that harkens back to my favorite adventures of first edition and other editions. It's like there's a location and there's just so much you can do there, and you can do it any different way. And there's adversaries there that are doing their thing, and you're trying to thwart them. And it, like you're saying, it just opens it up to player decision, player choice. What are you guys doing? It's not this sightseeing tour where the player's being led by the hand.
And the locations in both of those adventures are deeply inventive. They really invite thought, figuring things out. They inspire creativity. Every time I played Curse of Strahd in the Ravenloft adventure, wow, I'm just struck by how much detail and thought goes into that location. And it's not just this room you battle this thing, and this next room you battle another thing, and then you collect some loot, because there's a depth to it, an inventiveness that goes beyond anything that at least I could ever improvise at the table.
Yeah.
Really, really well done.
I'm running right now Keep on the Borderlands. I wanted to run it before the Heroes in the Borderlands came out, so I could kind of compare and contrast the styles of play. And it's just, a big slog of encounters, but it's a site that the players can explore, and they can play off the enemies against each other, and they can learn information about one enemy from another enemy group, and they can spy on creatures, and there's enemies that can double cross them, and it's just so much there with that adventure. It's going to be, but it's hard to prepare because you got to have all that kind of in mind when you go in there to run it. So it's 32 pages, maybe, probably only like 17 or 16 or 17 of those are actual content for the adventure site, and they're densely packed because they were all written before you had word processors. So it's just stream of thought. You have this room block, and it starts describing the creatures that are there. Then it tells you what some of them are wearing. Then it says, oh, and in the room you see this, this, and this buried there in the middle of the stat block somewhere. The first thing the player should see when they walk into the room. And then there might be some secret trap at the very end of the paragraph that you should have known right away before they walked into the room. It really would benefit from a lot of reorganization, and they did that when they went back and did some of the adventures. Like their later adventures are pretty well written, I think, in 5th edition, for giving you that information that you need in the right order of needing it. So while Keep on the Borderlands is fun in the old style, it is a lot of work on the DM to kind of be prepared for it and be ahead of the players for it. Or you just, don't feel bad if you deviate from the adventure, because you probably will. You'll miss things that are written there because they're buried in the paragraph that you don't see, and that's okay. Hey, Amit, thanks for coming to the show. He says, toss up between Curse of Strahd and Tomb of Annihilation for a Babe Adventure. Both very well written, with great replay value. Yeah, and I loved how they brought on. We're going to talk a little bit about how do they get back their momentum, right? How does D&D get back its momentum? We're going to look at what momentum it had in 5th edition, and now it's kind of flatlining and maybe going down if they're not careful. How do they get that back? How do they get back the goodwill that they had with everyone? And so let's launch into here a little bit about Jeremy and Chris's departure. Let's look at this Screen Rant article. So interestingly, Chris and Jeremy, I invited them both if they'd want to join. Of course, no answer there. I'm sure they're getting lots and lots of invites. But if Chris or Jeremy, you ever see this in the future, we'd love to know what you're doing in the future. Love to have you on. So their tweets announcing their departures were pretty short. And, it's been great. It's been 28 years. It's been a lot of fun, and the future looks bright. And this article here about the both of them leaving really only quotes their boss. So Jess Lanzillo, who's their recent boss of 1 year, said that this is something that the company had prepared for. Both of them had been working on Dungeons and Dragons for a very long time. It's been a point of discussion for some time and something that we've been training up everyone for. They feel really good about the teams they have in place and legacy that they're passing on. So you got James Wyatt there still. He did a lot of stuff, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you have Wesley Schneider, who did Shadow of the Dragon Queen. He was the lead designer of Shadow of the Dragon Queen, which I thought was really good. The bad part about Shadow of the Dragon Queen is they didn't pull in the original designers like they did for Curse of Strahd. They just left them out of the loop, which I think is a loss. You shouldn't ever do that. If they're available and they want to make themselves available, pull them in. But I thought it was well done as far as a Dragonlance adventure that you could play in the world of Dragonlance. Felt very much like you're in Dragonlance and Kryn, and yet did not step on the toes of the original adventure that was out in 85 time frame. So that's promising. And then there's several other younger designers there. We'll see how their products do. Unfortunately, I think some of them have been highly involved in these later adventures that haven't felt too good, in my opinion. So I hope they'll go back to like the site-based adventures someday in the future. Lanzillo says, let's see, we'll continue on here. They wanted to make sure that the core rule books were really successful, that they were setting up all of the future leads for success. That has happened, and they feel really reassured that the folks in place will be able to carry on with the wonderful legacy that they've given us and then bring their own stuff to the table, which they've already been doing. So this is all from Lanzillo. I don't know how much of this is their words or how much of this is her words. So keep that in mind. They left on their own terms. There was not some wider corporate move. It's one of those things where you finished a major keystone creative project and you do ask yourself, okay, do I have the next one in me for right now? I hope they have something in the future because I'd love to see the work that they do in the future on their own. Do I want to do something a little bit different? I think any creative can identify with that. And then they go into who will replace them. And we already talked about James Wyatt and Wes Schneider. They named Justin Armand. There. So let's talk a little bit about D&D's popularity. Oh, and we got some more comments here. Brian, I think they need to stop with the anthology books. Yeah, I wonder how those are doing. I mean, they're handy, right, when you want to pull out an adventure, but they don't really bring any kind of sense of commonality to the players of your game. Because no one's played all those anthology books all the way through, I don't think. But people have played Curse of Strahd and people have played Tomb of Annihilation. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what can they do.
I ran the Saltmarsh anthology book from cover to cover.
Cover to cover, yeah.
And I think I might have done all of the other one that included Tomb of Horrors. Save, I didn't do Tomb of Horrors, but I think I ran
that one. That was Tales from the Yawning Portal.
Yeah,
which I think had the giants in it. Greg Cherry. Hey, Greg. I mean, does anyone have actual sales numbers for the new books? So that's a point of contention, right? The only quote we have
is a cat intrusion here.
The only quote we have is that they're the quote fastest selling. What does that mean? I mean, that can mean anything, right? We sold 100 of them faster than we sold 100 of any other book. That doesn't mean you sold very many. So that's a point of contention. There's some anecdotal evidence that's not great. You can look at D&D Beyond's top ranked sales, and they're not in the top. And Mearls posted a post where they didn't even beat Tasha's as far as sales rank and as they came out, which is bad. In Hasbro's fourth quarter, they don't mention D&D at all. And Hasbro's fourth quarter in 2024 was worse than 2023. And interestingly, we'll look at are they losing market share to other companies? You know, we have Shadow Dark, which I love, which is huge Kickstarters, like 4 million over the last 2 years, right? But if you look at its trending on Google compared to D&D, if D&D is 100, Shadow Dark's 1. Just doesn't. It's a blip, right? Here, I gotta share a chart on that. Let's see. Here we go. I got D&D versus Pathfinder versus Shadow Dark. This is interesting. Okay, so we're all seeing that. So this is for the last, well, since 2010. 2010 here. D&D is in red. The winner. You can see it gaining momentum as 5th edition came out in the early years of 5th edition. I think this is an anomaly here. I don't think it went down during the pandemic, because this is right about the start of the pandemic right here. And there's this note here that their collecting of data got better. So I think this trend probably continued right up onto this spike, and then it's flatlined. And we'll look at when the spike happened. Well, down here's Pathfinder. Pathfinder's just been kind of flat. It's lost maybe a little bit of ground since 5th edition came out. And then down here in the blue line is Shadow Dark, and it doesn't even come off 0. And that makes sense, because when you look at sales for Hasbro in the 4th quarter, gosh, I think this is just 4th quarter, not all year. They were like on the tabletop, which includes Magic the Gathering and D&D, it was 330 million roughly area of how many they had, how much sales they had. Whereas Shadow Dark's doing gangbusters, but it's 4 million. So it makes sense. It's 1/100th of D&D. So they're not losing a lot of ground, I don't think, necessarily to these coming up Kickstarters. They're kind of just losing interest in general. And we'll talk about how they can maybe get that back.
It's been said that, you know, D&D's biggest competition isn't other role-playing games like Pathfinder. It's other activities that you can do with your time. It's Baldur's Gate and other video games. It's movies. It's whatever else you choose to do as an alternative thing for your time and attention.
Yeah,
that's the competition, because something like you know, even Pathfinder is a tiny fraction, and Shadow Dark is pretty much negligible as a competitor.
Yeah, it's interesting. Shadow Dark, my highest viewed video of all time is a Shadow Dark video. You would think it'd be D&D with this much popularity that D&D has, but there's so many channels that cover D&D that have hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and I have a couple thousand, right? So
yes,
not going to get a lot there. I'm going to grab my Ghost Spear Castle here real quick. So I hope to give this away sometime, if we ever get enough super chats on this video or some future video. This is a really cool book, because this was coming out the same time. This was 2013 when this came out, and it has the D&D Next playtest in it. And we'll talk about rules more here in a little bit, but this book is about maybe 50-50 adventure / playtest rules. So if I split the book, half of that, or one side of that, is the adventures that they have included, and the other side of that is the playtest rules. So the adventures take up 142 pages, and the playtest rules go from 143 to 280. So you got basically the whole D&D rule set in here, as it was in D&D Next. And there's some interesting little things in there for history. Cure Wounds was 2d8 in D&D Next before they reduced it to 1d8 in 5th edition, and now it's back up to 2d8 in the 2024 rule set. They had no bonus actions, and that's what I would love to have seen 5th edition go to, because I love the action economy that Shadow Dark has. And that's what they had in D&D Next. It was just action and move. And they had some things they called, quote, swift spells. Like they had Healing Word was a swift spell that you could do when you did something else, but not another spell.
Did they have reactions?
They had reactions.
How did Shield work? How was the reaction?
Reaction, yeah.
Okay.
Shield was only +4 instead of +5. It would have been nice to see them tone down Shield a little bit in the 2024 edition. Okay, let's get back to some more comments here. Brian, I missed that, Brian. It was some work to make them run together. Been sold at my local, I missed which one that was. Kickstarters are going to take a hit in the next few years due to tariffs, possibly, maybe. I think there's some light with regard to book tariffs not being impacted, I think I heard, but still, you're right about that. Admit, Yawning Portal was the only one that was solid. Quest from the Infinite Staircase has some good ones as well, but anthologies just don't keep players as interested as the longer story arcs. Greg, I think them being sniffed by indie is an illusion. Yeah, I don't think indie's taking their stuff away. I think they're just giving their stuff away, giving the players away to other hobbies, like you're saying, David. And Brian was agreeing about running Salt Marsh. Yeah, I ran the first couple of adventures of Salt Marsh. I didn't run the one that's underwater. How'd that go when you ran that, David?
I didn't love it. It's very
Yeah.
combat focused. It's all underwater. It's huge.
Yeah, definitely.
There's tons of foes. It doesn't really play, at least at my table, it didn't play as a crawl. It played as an assault with foes getting alerted and coming and attacking and just punishing long sequence of combats.
Shadow Dark and other indie games' success stories might have had some influence on them to leave Wizards, because unless they were fired, and maybe start something of their own in the near future, possibly. It feels like that's kind of a dangerous path. It feels like Shadow Dark really hit the jackpot. Shadow Dark was positioned just at the right time, right when the OGL happened. That's why I was looking. I went to look at Shadow Dark if Hasbro hadn't messed up. Maybe I'd check it out by now, but I was certainly looking for stuff then, because when they messed up, I took part in the boycott of D&D Beyond, pulled my membership from D&D Beyond until they removed the OGL, like they did. I think Hasbro Wizards of the Coast could maybe take a page out of Goodman Games' book in the way they publish their DCC stuff, much like 1E mods. Find a way to publish 32 to 64 quality paged adventures.
Those are just not economically feasible, though, because they don't have the shelf space as spines, and they don't cost enough to merit the underlying costs. So we're not gonna see those from Wizards of the Coast.
All right, let's look at this chart. I put this chart together trying to get an idea of what drove the popularity of D&D in 5th edition and what drove the decline, or is starting to drive the decline. And that blue jagged line is the popularity of all D&D searches on Google. And it's normalized. So the most volume that happened, which happened in 2013, right about the time the D&D movie came out, is 100. And then everything else was normalized to that. And it's a combination of searches for D&D, the letters D, N, and D, and the search for D and the ampersand D, and Dungeons and Dragons spelled out, D space ampersand space D, and Dungeons and Dragons all spelled out. So we can see when 5th edition started. So the playtest happened starting in mid-2012. And the Ghosts of Dragonspear Castle came out in 2013 at Gen Con. So that was like right at near the end of the 5th edition playtest. And then the Player's Handbook came out the next year, 2014, at Gen Con, I believe. And then it was followed by the Monster Manual and the DMG shortly thereafter. So a lot of credit is given to Critical Role. Season 1 is here. Season 2 is here. Season 3 is here. Those seasons are huge. I didn't realize just how overarching Critical Role is all through the whole time frame. And a lot of credit's been given to Stranger Things. Stranger Things Season 1 here, 2, 3, and 4 there. 5 is pending. And it's hard to say for sure, because here the books came out in 2014, and it's just been a steady growth. And again, I think this might be an anomaly in the data. So a steady growth right up until 2023. And what happened in January of 2023? The OGL scandal. And then right after that, the Pinkerton scandal. And oh my God, whoever was ultimately responsible for that OGL scandal, I think tanked their movie and really should be gotten rid of from the company for what they did to that movie, because the OGL scandal happened and people were all talking about boycotting the D&D movie. Now, you can see the popularity of the D&D movie is big. The popularity of any movies or Stranger Things on search terms is huge. So I have this other one here. I'll share this one. And so here we can see the search terms, again, normalized with Stranger Things being the biggest search. Every season of Stranger Things, huge searching. D&D is down here. You can't even see it. Just, no comparison to people searching for Stranger Things. A little bit of Baldur's Gate 3, hits a spike here. We can see it. A little bit of Critical Role in the first start of the Critical Role years kind of hits a spike that you can see, and also near the end hits a spike. Not a spike, but comes up a little. So you can see that contribution. So the question is it Critical Role and Stranger Things that drove the popularity, or is it just that 5th edition was good? And I think it's...
Well, let me share.
Go ahead. Yeah. What's your thought?
My anecdotal experience from that, because I was running drop-in D&D games every week from a game store for the first 10 years of the edition. And I saw who was dropping in. And from my perspective, Critical Role absolutely was driving a lot of folks to the store. I'd get in people regularly who were fans of Critical Role and wanted to try and do it in a game store setting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how my voice acting compares to Matt Mercer. It's possible that they might have been a little disappointed by my voices, but some of them did. A lot of people did stick around and keep playing, and sometimes they would start running their own campaigns, their own games, and so on. So it definitely drove people to the game store to try playing for themselves. And I think it's very valuable for Wizards of the Coast to have a program like the Encounters program that's on the shelf behind me, where you could bridge that gap from interest in the game to actually getting a chance to play it in an informal setting and give it a try. It's really, as we all know, it's really hard to find a group, and especially if you've never played before and you're not, with a bunch of school chums who are also interested. How do you even get started?
Yeah.
That's what the Encounters program, from my perspective, succeeded at. Now, I don't want to minimize. I think 5th edition was a fantastic edition. It was very welcoming to new players. It had a lot of virtues that, to some extent, it's lost in the 2024 rules and with the expansion. But it's a great edition of the game, and that certainly helped drive people to embrace it.
Yeah. They're kind of trying to do something similar right now. They have their Uni and the Hunt for the Lost Unicorn or Lost Horn, their Signs of Elemental Evil, and their Hold Back the Dead, which are in-store play programs and premiering at conventions. And have you run any of those, David? Or is anyone in the chat run any of those?
Just playing Hold Back the Dead. I don't think that's an ideal D&D experience to introduce to folks to the game.
Yeah. They're all using the pre-gen characters from the cartoon, right? Which have some crazy overpowered magic items, for sure.
And they're not characters that have any sort of resonance for people who are younger than you and I.
Right, yeah. Yeah. Val points out that 5th edition was a real breath of fresh air. It really was. And you were saying something before we started, David, about really what they were shooting for with 5th edition. You want to talk about that? What Mearls was posting?
Yeah, I've been going back at some of the initial design articles back in the days of D&D Next when they were designing 5th edition. The design team, mostly Mearls and for a while Monty Cook, who was on the design team for a while, were posting weekly articles about what their goals and approaches were to the next edition of D&D. That would be the first 5th edition. And there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. For one thing, Mearls was big on supporting a diversity of play styles. I'm going to read this little quote here. He says, traditionally, D&D editions have focused on specific play styles. This approach has fragmented the community over time. The next iteration must stretch the system to cover a wider variety of play styles through character and DM options. By looking at past editions and incorporating their elements as core or optional rules, we can allow players and groups to place the focus where they want it. Now, that's a great goal. And to some extent, it fell by the wayside because they decided not to go all in on the optional rules like they did initially. But I also think that the design of the game and maybe some critical role is partly to blame for this, partly to credit for this. The game has drifted to its own particular play style. It's become more emphasizing character power. It's become more emphasizing character backgrounds. This is an important part of the game. And it's lost a little bit of attention to letting characters fail. I think there's a real direction where characters, instead of having a chance to fail, they're definitely emphasizing showing off and that vicarious fun. We all enjoy it, that vicarious fun of showing off what your character can do, as opposed to, dealing with the setbacks and strategizing and that kind of stuff that's also terrific fun.
Got a super chat. First one from Cade. Thanks, Cade. $10. You're the first one in the drawing for the Ghosts of Dragonspear Castle. Remember the Poor. Cade's playing off and on as a guest player in the Keep on the Borderlands with us. And that, so anecdotally, speaking back to what you're talking about there, David, I'm playing that using my D20play RPG rules I'm working on, which are like between Shadowdark and 5th edition, closer to Shadowdark in grimness and simplicity and speed of play. And, there's danger. Characters die and you replace characters, but character creation is so fast that you don't mind it. Whereas 5th edition has grown character creation to some sort of huge ordeal, and they're not helping. They're adding more complexity at lower levels as they go. Teos had a really good article where he talked about his feelings about the player's handbook, right? And he's been against the first level feat this whole time, just as I have been since the playtest, and others, I think.
Me?
Yeah. You got to get players into the game fast with their own characters. You can get them into the game fast with the pre-gen, sure, but let them make their own characters fast and let them die, and make a new character. I implemented some carousing rules that were pretty painful in the way they rolled, and characters lost some stuff. And afterwards I said, was that too much? And they go, no, we loved it, because it added story. It added story to why did you get imprisoned? What were you trying to steal? Who did you run into? How did you get, off the hook? Who bribed the judge to let you free? Just added that kind of information to the game. Meanwhile, the character's losing half his gear and doesn't care. Has fun doing it. So I think there's a lot to be said about really putting characters through the ringer. I think
looking at your experience with your D20 play and our experience with Shadowdark, I see that as D&D has been optimized and focused on a particular play style, it's definitely left that flank, that area of the market for people who are interested in something more player challenge focused,
Yeah.
and speed of play focused, to jump in and serve that part of the market. I might credit some of that vacuum that the D&D design direction has left with part of the surging popularity, surging for some values of 1/100th of D&D,
Right.
surging popularity of Shadow Dark.
Yeah.
It serves a place, it scratches an itch,
Yeah.
we should say, that the D&D is not as interested in scratching
Yeah.
as it used to be.
And it's not for all players. I've had plenty of players that bounced off Shadow Dark and wanted more D&D. Because you're right, there's a lot there with regard to character power and not having kind of throwaway characters, not having a character that can just die at any given adventure. Um, so it's not necessarily for everyone. Now, another thing that Mearls talked about, and you were hitting on this, was speed of play. I think fifth edition can keep a pretty high character power, but still retain high speed of play, and they seem to have kind of lost sight of that. In the D&D Next rules, there's no bonus actions. And Merle's, what did he say? I forget what he said. He's something about how it was the dumbest idea they ever came up with, and it was his idea, so he can say that. So they must have added that in, after the playtesting was kind of finished, and before the 2014 Player's Handbook released, we got bonus actions. And every game that I run that has a multitude of actions that you can try to fill really seems to bog down on the player's turns because they think they have to fill all those actions, even if nothing really, you know, resonates to take that action up. They feel like, oh, I got to think about this for another couple minutes and figure out what I need to do. Or worse, every other player starts chiming in and telling them what to do, which I hate. So
Yeah, I think that's my biggest sore spot with the development of fifth edition is that the speed of play has fallen by the wayside. Mearls set out as one of his top 3 or 4 goals for D&D Next when they were designing the new edition to emphasize speed of play. He wrote, "You should be able to play a complete adventure in an hour, not a single encounter, not a character creation session, but a complete scenario that would strike a reasonable player as an adventure with a beginning, middle, and end." He says that that statement is one of the guiding principles that helped launch the entire process. There are a lot of things that the design does, especially with character options over time that they've introduced, that definitely have lost sight of speed of play. And I can name things like the Twilight Cleric handing out temporary hit points every turn, which is a lot of bookkeeping and discussion amongst the table every single turn. And things like weapon mastery, which undoubtedly have some virtues. I kind of like playing a melee character and getting those benefits. But on the other hand, you've got somebody who's with multiple attacks, probably making a series of attacks one after the other, rolling each attack individually, then rolling damage, then rolling a saving throw, and then a bunch of discussion about what the effect has been applied, and then a little bit more decision making between those attacks about what you want to do next, possibly capped with, if you're a character optimizer, a chance to switch weapons. Good grief. That's just too slow.
I like to think we run really, really fast in 5th edition. If you want to go look at a video of something after you watch this video of our actual play of Vecna chapter 6, probably the 6B video, I think it'd be, or no, it might be 5B, where they're fighting against Strahd, who becomes someone else we won't say. And there's, demons, and there's shambling mounds, and things are happening fast, but there are so many options happening. If you look at the shortcuts that I have on the right of the screen as we're playing, the fighters are making their attacks, and there's like 10 choices with every. That's exaggerated. It might be like 4 choices with every attack. of what effect they're going to do. And yeah, you can see why I love going back to Shadow Dark sometimes. Greg says Shadow Dark wasn't for us. Yeah, definitely not for everyone. The speed of play there, 5th edition goes for, hey, on my turn I can do a lot of things. Shadow Dark, I think, goes for, hey, I'm going to get a lot of turns. I don't do much on a turn, but I'm going to have a lot more turns than if I was playing 5th edition. And I go for that. I love speed of play. I played with same like 7 to 9 people for many years in different systems. They find first level feats and more character options and improvement. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Be cautious there. We're all experienced, right? We can make those decisions, but how does a new player see it? How do we get new players into the game? Is it fun for them to take a long time to make their character? It's not, and I've played a lot. It's not necessarily fun for me. I don't care if I get a feat at first level. Get me into this. I'm exploring some cool sites. That's what I want to do. Explore some cool
Feats at
sites.
first level was a common house rule prior to actually handing out feats at first level. So it's definitely a popular option. And I can see what made the design team so enthusiastic. All you got to do is open like that Dragonlance book with the options that tie a particular feat to a particular character type. And you really want to get that background and really set the, I don't know, purple dragon knights or whatever as distinct from just a plain old fighting person.
So let's talk some more about the rise of 5th edition. Just a great rule set, I think, going up and up and up. Critical Role, doing gangbusters online, Stranger Things, making mention of it. Another thing someone brought out, well, of course, there's these great adventures early on. We got Curse of Strahd was in 2016, Tomb of Annihilation was in 2017, and there was adventures constantly. I didn't list them all here, but there was a constant stream of adventures, and these adventures were supported in parallel with their organized play. So you had organized play seasons that were matching in parallel the hardcovers. And so there's a real commonality of experience for all the players, and a lot of things to talk about with other players online, a lot of things to talk about with other players in person. So you got a lot of discussion. I think there's so many options now that a lot of players just aren't playing the same stuff, and so there's less discussion of their similar experiences that are happening.
That commonality of play is a wonderful thing. I'm not sure you can recapture it without going to a completely new edition. But you can capture some of it.
Yeah.
They've completely sent it by the wayside now.
So let me share this tab. Not only did they have Critical Role, but they had Wizards of the Coast themselves were sponsoring actual plays of their big adventures. So Curse of Strahd, there was a dice camera action with Chris Perkins running, just masterful DMing. And that series, it went past Curse of Strahd and it kind of petered out. I don't know what happened after that as it was petering out. But really good series there. And then we had in Tomb of Annihilation, they hire Matthew Mercer to DM the let's see, does this work if I play it?
Don't. But you can watch my episode with Matt.
So you got Matthew Mercer, you got Joe Manganiello, you got Deborah Ann Wool, and Deborah Ann and Joe, fantastic players. The kind of players you want to have at your table because they're in character, they know what they're going to do right away. They've been paying attention. Their turns go fast, but they do cool shit on their turns, as opposed to well, those are the kind of players you want, and they were really good. And then of course you have the DM, who is Matthew Mercer, who does a fantastic job. And these are on purpose Wizards of the Coast sponsored streams that they're doing of their own campaigns. So you have a lot of hype, and that's kind of fallen by the wayside now. They don't have that anymore.
Can you make out how many views are on that particular video?
Sure. This one has 1.1 million views.
Oh, okay. Well, so much for my theory that juice wasn't worth the squeeze for that one.
That's a lot of views, right?
That's a lot of views.
Episode 1 of Dice Game Reaction has 1.2 million views. So there we get, this is episode 1 of Force Grey, 1.1 million. And, they did the whole Tomb of Annihilation. And then Curse of Strahd did the whole. Curse of Strahd. Dice Game Reaction did the whole Curse of Strahd. Okay, we got a lot more chats here. Let's see here. Greg says an hour. So yeah, an hour seems like that would be hard, right? You can maybe squeeze in 3 encounters in an hour if 2 of them aren't combat. And if you're playing a simple game like Shadow Dark, you might do 3 encounters in an hour. That could even be combat encounters. But that's a pretty short adventure, in my opinion. Yeah, it could have a beginning and a middle and an end. Could be a full adventure. I agree. You could do it. It's nice to have a pretty good site-based adventure that fills up 4 hours. So I have a Pay What You Want adventure on DriveThruRPG, 2 on the Borderlands, which is pretty good site-based adventure, and it filled 4 hours. And then you can have pretty big site-based adventures that can fill 3-4 sessions. Like 2 on the Borderlands, I think we're going to finish in 5 sessions. But yeah, an hour is not going to be a very long adventure for sure. Now, Beg says, do we forfeit depth for speed? What is the balance? Is the point of the game to get as much done as possible, or is it about the enjoyment of the journey? It's a balance, right? And is the point of the game to get as much done as possible? No, but instead it's much fun as possible, right? And I have more fun exploring than I do waiting for another player to take a very long turn in combat. Now, maybe individual players like taking very long turns in combat, but I don't think that's the case for everyone at the table liking turns in combat taking so very long. And we run very fast. You go watch one of our videos and our turns of combat are going real quick. So it can be done fast. But the thing about 5th edition is it's gotten to the point where I say this, it's a lot of math to find out you're okay. Whereas Shadow Dark is hardly any math at all, and you might die. So there's, that aspect of it. But you should definitely enjoy it. And I think enjoyment, it varies by group, right? Some groups might not like exploring a lot of a dungeon. They might like spending a lot of time on their turn doing a lot of tactical stuff. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of tactical stuff going on. I think Teos might have said this in the player's handbook, and other people in comments might have said this. There's not a lot of tactics happening on the table in the encounter. There's a lot of decisions about your character build that inform what you do, but they don't even have flanking. They don't even really, cover isn't really a thing because most things make cover go away. So the actual tactics of a combat aren't really there. Sorry. No offense, Tom or Tim. My name's Tom. Your games are pretty roleplay light. Absolutely, Greg. Definitely. That is for sure. Do you make rules for new people? Not sure. Deborah Wool is always welcome at my table. She's great, right? Tiger Uppercut. Just a fantastic player. Interesting, D&D wasn't for me, but Shadow Dark is. I'm a newcomer for the D20 system. Mostly played D100. Yeah, interesting. So tell us what you liked better about Shadow Dark than you liked about D&D. That'd be an interesting take. Okay, now let's get back to the popularity. So you have these great campaigns. You got a lot of support. You have like these launch parties that are happening for every new campaign. Critical Role's going, Stranger Things is going. You got tabletops, Roll20 starting back here. You got D&D Beyond coming in here, Foundry coming in here. And it all kind of comes to a peak. You can see there's a big surge for Dungeons and Dragons. That matches the name of the D&D movie, how it was like named in the trailers and such. So a lot of people looking for trailers, I bet, happening there. And maybe this peak was their early trailers, and this peak was when the movie actually came out. And so you see this big surge in popularity, and then it's just kind of been flatline since that point. And of course, we had the OGL scandal hit, which happened after they announced the 2024 playtests. OGL scandal hits, Pinkerton's hit, and people are boycotting like crazy, and the goodwill's gone. And then they come out with the 2024 rules, which are not really a change. overall and didn't reset the power curve. So that, I think one thing that happens with any edition of games is as the game exists for longer and longer, after you've put out your player's handbook and your Monster Manual DMG, there's no other stuff to do for the rules unless you start doing player options, right? Or adventures or monsters and treasure. And of those things, what sells the very most is player options. And so it's such a temptation, I think, for any company to just start putting out more and more player options. And that's what happened. And players get more and more powerful. And then eventually you reset the edition. And all those player options go away and everyone starts back at 0. And then it builds up again. But this time they didn't do that. They didn't reset the edition. All those player options are all still there. And they did the rules again, and they kind of rearranged a bunch of stuff, but didn't really change to a whole new baseline. So the power creep that's been happening this whole time is still there. And it's made the game slower and slower and slower as we go for a lot of reasons. Any takes on that, David, as I go through the comments? Oh, this is David. David's got a good point. This is an interesting way to do it. There's a couple systems that do it this way, and Shadow Dark does it this way. That your traits at level advancement are random rather than planned. I'm not a huge fan of planned builds. I mean, I can go optimize the crap out of a character fine, but I want to play the best I can play a character that I have versus making the best character, I guess, is where I get my fun. And so that might attract people to Shadow Dark if you like that kind of path. If you want to plan your character out, then of course Shadow Dark's not going to give that for you, and D&D will, and a lot of other systems like D&D. The only thing that will restore goodwill is great modules. Yeah, they need great modules. I think they need a lot of involvement in those adventure paths. I think will help. Let's talk about things that'll help. Things what are going to make this flat line from their big fiasco start going back up again. Any thoughts there, David? Oh, I lost David. David's gone completely. Any thoughts there, chat? We'll see if David can come back. So, you know, you can have organized play, shadowing the campaigns again, get tightly focused again. And that's kind of completely almost petered out. There's still some organized play, but it's being distributed to various individuals. Bald Man Games is going to be doing Legends of Greyhawk, which I like. That's cool. But it's not following any campaign, hardcover that's coming out. So there's no commonality of experience happening there. And then you have the Eastern Marches, I think, is going to be Gamehole Con is going to be Eastern Marches. So there's not a commonality of experience. I think bringing back a commonality of experience would help. I'm afraid the 2024 rule set is going to be a downer. I don't think that's going to bring people in. I don't know what point they punt. We'll see if it gets better, but 4th edition, it was a downer all through 4th edition. They tried to come back with essentials, partway through, trying to save 4th edition, didn't save it. And finally, they did a new edition. And that was a breath of fresh air, right? Everyone talks about how fun that was. And I think they're going to eventually need to do that. So a new set of rules. Goodwill to the community. Don't talk down members of the community. People of certain skin tones, people of certain ages, people of certain genders. Invite everyone in and keep everyone in. Don't say we don't want this person in or we don't want that person in. That's terrible, horrible marketing. What in the heck are you doing? Everyone is welcome playing D&D. Everyone. Make sure that is never, ever an issue. You don't need to say how much better you are than the people that were 50 years ago. Okay, just don't do that. Just be good people now. You don't need to talk down other people. And invite everyone in and get goodwill, and then get the stars playing in campaigns again. I think that'd help. See if anyone else has any ideas here. Typical T-Rex says, I'd want quality content I can bring to my table. Key thing, DM support. Yeah. Better modules, more monsters, more stories. Yeah. focus on supporting the DM. It'll be really interesting to see what Heroes in the Borderland does for supporting the DMs. I find tactics to be a lot of things. Casting spike growth down a tight corridor where the ogre is coming. Great tactics for use of character abilities. Kind of the same thing. Sure, yeah, tactics is a lot of things for sure. David says, again, just a personal take, but one thing that turned me off to 2024 is the art direction. Oh, David lost his internet. So it's just us, guys. Dwarves baking cookies just as in D&D. A lot of the casters are all, Teo's pointed this out, a lot of the casters are all levitating all over the place. Now there's some great art. Let's find some good art that we'd like to see more of. If we come into Player's Handbook, I'll open this guy up, share this instead. Let's see, where is it in creating a character or playing the game? Go back to playing the game. I think playing the game is the one that's got the Dragonlance cover. Yeah. So they got great art. There's some great art in there. More of this, less of obviously not adventuring things. We want to go on adventures. We want to fight dragons. We want to defeat demons. We want to be great heroes, find lost temples, stuff like that. I think that's a good point for the art direction. More of this, less of the other floofy things. See what else we got for ideas. Now, if you go back and look at art from all the past editions, it's varied a lot. There's plenty of art I don't like in lots of past edition books too. So, and that's very personal taste on things as well. I think that's not necessarily hugely important as much as just make sure you keep everyone invited to your game. As someone joining D&D during 5th edition, I feel like I missed some historical story elements. The spell plague comes to mind. Recently, Pathfinder 2e with the God's Reign, something world-changing and fun. David Dyer, yes, more of that. Yeah, looking at the art here for the Player's Handbook, that's good. Bring in players and keep them. Got to bring in players and keep them. And that OGL fiasco. So now, another question we got to ask ourselves, and chat, it'd be interesting to get your take on this. Let's do I can't do a poll, but will Hasbro ever be happy with the D&D tabletop? Right? I mean, is it ever something that they're going to be content with? Because it's not going to be some hugely monetized, huge money maker that makes $1 billion. It never will be. They can try and make it that, and they can fail. They did the OGL and just crushed their momentum with that. And they did. Oh, David's coming back. Hey, David, you're back. We're still going. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay, David?
Yep.
Awesome. So we're just talking about the momentum and how they crushed it with the OGL.
Oh, maybe I'm not so good here.
I can hear you okay. Can you hear me? They crushed it with the OGL, and then what else we're talking about does Hasbro, will they ever be happy with D&D as a role-playing game? And will they always try to make it more than that? And I think they will always try to make it more than that. I don't think they're content with what kind of profit they can get with a role-playing game. And they'll try and do things like Sigil, which apparently has failed terribly. And they'll try and get the monetization they can by limiting the opponents with the OGL change, which failed terribly. Will they come to realization that an RPG doesn't make more money than D&D makes? And will they take the gradual increase in its popularity that they can get by goodwill? They can keep going up a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. It won't be like an asymptotic spike that I think they'd like to see. So if they come to the realization that they can't get anything from it, will they want to still be its steward as far as the rules go, or will they license those out? There's a chance they might license those out. And we'll see what happens there. David, can you hear me and talk at all?
Yeah, you sound like you're back.
Okay, good deal. So what we were asking, and what are your thoughts on this? Will Hasbro ever be happy with D&D as a regular RPG? or are they going to keep trying to ramp up its profit?
I think that's going to depend on the team behind D&D. There's always that risk that they'll decide that D&D is not worth the investment as a tabletop game and license it out to somebody else as the caretaker for the tabletop stuff, and just keep what they consider the money-making bit with the video games and the potential TV series and the slot machines.
Yeah. I mean, they got a great property, right? They'll hold on to that and they'll license that forever. I don't think they'll sell it because it's worth a lot of money. But the tabletop role-playing game is not worth a whole lot of money to them. So they might keep a skeleton crew on it. And then maybe we'll go through a cycle like happened with 5th edition, where you have this skeleton crew that Hasbro doesn't care about. Now, they weren't that skeletal back then. If you look at the contributions to Ghost of Dragon Spear Castle, there's a lot of names here. If we look in the front of this guy, the D&D R&D team had Greg Billsland, who's back, just got rehired, Bruce Cordell, Jeremy Crawford, Chris Dubois, Peter Lee, Mike Mearls, Kim Mohan, Tom Olson, Christopher Perkins, Ben Petrosor, Robert Schwal, Matt Sarnett, Chris Sims, Rodney Thompson, Steve Winter, James Wyatt, and James Wyatt's still there, and Chris Youngs. And project leads were Crawford and Perkins. So they had a pretty big team, but corporate wasn't paying attention to them. And that's really, I think, the only way the RPG flourishes. Corporate's got to kind of not care about it. If they try and do their corporate things with it, bad things are going to happen.
I think they're going to keep paying attention as long as they've got that big investment on D&D Beyond with their subscriber base.
Yeah.
But we're probably also seeing a little bit of a pivot towards hosting other companies' content on D&D Beyond, and then just reaping whatever their cut of those items on D&D Beyond, which, from what I've heard, is quite lucrative for the companies who are able to get their content on the D&D Beyond.
And Greg says this is all just drama on the internet, which, to be fair, there's a lot more drama on the internet than there is in person, right? But we can definitely see a flat line. It hasn't kept going up like it could have. So something, and what we want to see is that momentum come back. How do they get that momentum coming back up? And T-Rex agrees. And just internet noise for clicks from Greg. And now, to be fair, Greg, I care about this. I want to see it go up and grow. Although I'm caring less and less with the system compared to other systems, I'd like to see the system kind of tighten up. I love D&D 5th edition. I think it's a great system. I just wanted to see it tighten up with the 2024 rules. And it certainly didn't tighten up. It just got slower than it was before.
It did get a little tighter, to be fair.
Yeah, there were areas that they cleaned up.
There are improvements.
Yeah, there was improvements. Animate objects comes to mind. That was a broken spell and a half, that's for sure. It's interesting, though. They fixed some things that were broken, but then they broke other things. And that's what can happen if you start just changing everything a little bit, tweaking everything a little bit. We'll see if they do erratas and fix those things that they accidentally broke. It'd be nice if they did. We'll see if they do that or not. Most of the D100 games like Mithras, Call of Cthulhu, or Harn are similar to D&D 5th in a way that they all need a lot of time to invest, especially to prep and run, while Shadow Dark doesn't. Yeah. I mean, you can just hop in a game of Shadow Dark and start exploring the dungeon, or exploring the area around the castle, or cool stuff like that. T-Rex, looking at you. Yeah. Conjure Minor Elementals, that just broke completely. Who's got a really good series on that? Treant Monk has got a series on that and how to fix it. He's always good at building characters, but he's also good at helping DMs with what you would need to fix because of these character builds that are completely overpowered. So look to him for if you ever wanted to kind of house rule a few things. He's got some good videos on doing that.
I would love to see the D&D team bring in somebody with a character optimization bent.
Oh yeah, just on the R&D team.
On the R&D team,
yeah.
I think about Magic the Gathering, where they pull in designers from competitive Magic players and have a real sense. Now, D&D doesn't necessarily have to be competitive, but I think somebody with that sort of eye for where the exploits might be, that'd be a huge asset.
Yeah, that's one thing that they've always seemed to have with 5th edition is either a blind spot to the exploits or just didn't care about the exploits. Because there's been exploits in 5th edition that are, pretty easy to fix that they just haven't touched for 10 plus years. And they changed them drastically, some of them, finally when they did 2024. So when they looked at them, they knew they weren't right, like Sharpshooter, for example. But they didn't do a thing about them for 10 years. So it'd be good to see some of that on the R&D team and see if they actually do something to catch those things. It'd be nice to see more game structure design, something that looks at how to set up an issue, a way for the party to explore, introduce NPCs, etc. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're kind of drawn to a close. We'll see what happens over the next year for 2024. They got another anthology coming out. They got the starter set coming out, which might be really good if it can introduce some new DMs. They have Forgotten Realms coming out. They got Eberron coming out before Forgotten Realms. So a lot of like campaign source books, right? No big campaign book, just an anthology book. And the fact that they didn't have a starter set ready for the launch is kind of just a big drop. Now, I think they had all their eggs in the basket of trying to get the virtual, tabletop ready, Sigil. They wanted Sigil ready for the launch, and it just wasn't. And we played a game of Sigil, a full-on game of Sigil. It was cool. It was pretty. Did some neat things, but God, as a DM to prep an adventure with it, it would have been a nightmare. You could buy prepped adventures. That'd be pretty cool, I think. And I don't know how much those would cost, but to prep your own, it would have been a nightmare. Tiger Uppercut. Remember when they had that competition where campaign settings were submitted? I submitted one. Did you submit one, David?
I did.
You did? Nice.
Yeah.
Why not try something like that again? Yeah, Eberron won that. Yeah, I remember writing 3. I think you had to write 3 ideas and send them in. God, that was a long time ago. Was that
2003, 4, something like that?
I think it was before I moved to Kansas, so 2002, I think, maybe. Yeah. The smattering of different books is a letdown. They could have benefited from having guided support in the starter set, campaign setting. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, God, when you look at the money that was sunk into Sigil, and if they had sunk that money into the launch of 2024, they might have got done on time to make it actually in the 50th year. They might have had a starter set ready to go. They might have had a group of designers who were top notch. They laid a bunch of them off a year ago, right? And they just sunk all that money into Sigil. And that's corporate trying to get more out of the RPG than the RPG will ever actually provide. All right. Oh, one more chat, and then we'll go. I've never thought about it that way. Thanks for that. All right. Thanks everyone for watching. We got one super chat. Thank you very much, Cade. I'm going to keep this going. And in future live streams, if we ever get up to 10, I'll remember Cade, you'll be in the drawing, Cade, for Ghost of Dragonspear Castle. And the old D&D Next play set that had no bonus actions would have been faster than what we have now by far. And it would have been nice if they tightened up and gone a little bit back toward that. All right. Thanks everyone for watching.
Bye, folks.